Ancient Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew and a special guest. But with the Cypher Unlimited crew, we have Spigs18 or Anthony, we have AD or Alpha D, and our special guest is Mr. Erik Frankhouse. You might have seen him here before. So Erik, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh boy, lately it's been streaming. I do Erik Frankhouse Presents, that's my Patreon. I do maps and audio guided adventures. Right now I'm working on a 5e setting. And you can find me all over the place under my name. Self-advertisement, best way to do it.
Awesome, awesome. Yep, the easy way to find you online. But yeah, Dean, and what are we doing here today?
Well, mechanics, and did I say mechanics? We're here to talk about our favorite mechanics. We're going to talk about what we like about them the most, and what some of the possible pitfalls could be. We're going to talk about implementation, misconceptions, and the whole nine. We're just going to talk about mechanics of Cypher System. Perfect. Anthony.
All right, so I guess we'll kick off this discussion and we'll have Al. Al, tell us what your favorite mechanic is.
So my favorite mechanic is the Intrusion mechanic, which can be broken down into the GM, Intrusion and the player Intrusion. We'll hit player Intrusion a little bit later. Let's start with GM Intrusion. So the book definition of GM Intrusion is found in page 408 of the revised Cypher System rulebook, and it is stated as such. GM Intrusion is the main mechanic that the GM uses to inject drama and additional excitement into the game. It's also a handy tool for resolving issues that affect the PCs but do not involve them. GM Intrusion is also a way to facilitate what goes on in the world outside the characters. Can the Minotaur track the PC's movements through the maze? Will the fraying rope hold? Since the players roll all the dice, GM Intrusion is used to determine if and when something happens. For example, if the PCs are fighting a Noble's Guard and you, the GM, know that there are more guards nearby, you don't need to roll any dice to determine if the guards hear the scuffle and intervene, unless you want to. You just decide when it would be best for the story, which is probably when it would be worse for the characters. In a way, GM Intrusion replaces the GM's dice rolling. It's pretty good definition there of GM Intrusions.
I think for the sake of this video and for the sake of expediency, for us going over 3 mechanics, we've written 5 questions that we're going to ask ourselves for each one of these game mechanics. And we started off with GM Intrusion, which is probably the most, I think, recognizable of the Cypher System, mechanics in general. It's what makes it so unique. So what is it that you guys like about the GM Intrusion mechanic?
So for me specifically, I enjoy the GM Intrusion mechanic because it keeps players on their toes. Like, they'll never know when, the GM or myself will be like, oh, hey, how about it? Like, they're attempting to do something like, oh, how about a GM Intrusion at this moment? I like that ability to add tension into the story at the drop of a hat, and it's also easily it's very streamlined, if that makes sense. Like, there's no befuddlement with like having to roll dice or figure out certain aspects of how to handle the mechanics of the game to like inject what you want to do. You just say what happens and it is what it is. And the cooler thing about the Intrusion mechanic, which it's not really mentioned in the definition, is that it can be, not discounting rolling a natural one. Like, if it's one I'm just offering, it can be rejected as a way to sort of have the players still have a way to mitigate what I'm trying to do to them.
Intrusions are awesome. GM Intrusions, I think, are the best way to tell a story for new GMs. I think that's the best thing that Cypher nailed with it. Like, GMs don't know when they're supposed to put their foot in the door to make a change or redirect a path. And I really think that GM Intrusions help new GMs feel like there's a tool there for them. Like, they're already not rolling dice. So they had to give them something where they go, okay, so they kick the door in. I know guys on the other side of the door. This is when I want that moment to happen. And this gives them the agency as a GM just to do it.
Yeah, and also I think in a lot of ways it helps a GM keep the rails going forward, if that makes any sense. Especially when you're not comfortable being able to rein in your players. The GM intrusion mechanic actually gives you that tool in your little tool bag to say, hey, I want these guys heading north, and they keep on stopping or going east. I'm just going to throw in an intrusion that's going to steer them in the direction I want them to go. And I think another thing that isn't in the definition, but it's a change in the narrative, really. It's not, it's basically you changing the story slightly to get what you need as a GM for your story.
It'll let you give your players a shot in the ass when they're sitting around and trying to do a shopping montage. Like, you can... Critical Role needs it. Like, it really lets you drive story in a direction. Like, if they start to veer, you can redirect them. Yeah. But I love that it's actually the core mechanic outside of Numenera for handing out experience. It's that whole, hey man, are you interested in this GM intrusion? Or, hey group, are you all unanimously in for this intrusion? And
that's probably, I'm sorry.
I was going to say that also has a negative side effect, but it's going to come up in one of the other questions, and I'll address that then. But Dean, say what you was going to say.
I was just going to say that, to me, that's probably the one thing I like about the GM intrusion the most, is the fact that I get to give out XP. I feel like that's a way. One, it encourages me as a GM to become a little more creative, and one of the biggest things that GM Intrusion did for me was it changed my thinking process.
Yeah.
Of 100%. What should happen. And, because, especially what, like Al said, when you roll a 1, that's a free GM intrusion. But they don't always have to be a negative, and that was a thing that happened playing other games. You roll a 1, it's a fumble, it's detrimental, Now with GM intrusions, it's like, no, guess what? It's just something that's going to add something or switch something. Now, sometimes it can be a negative, but for the most part, it's not, for me anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, all in all, I think it's a great mechanic. I think we could all agree on that.
Absolutely.
So here's the second question. How do you think this mechanic is best utilized in the game?
I think you guys already touched on what I was going to say for this. It's just that it's a very good tool for directing a player's, actions, or, like I said, like you guys said, I should say, if the players are trying to go east, but you want them to go north, you can throw up a GM intrusion that forces them to say, hey, this path is blocked by whatever hazard you want to invent for your story. You guys actually need to go north. And again, it's awesome in that, again, it helps you control the flow of the narrative a little bit better, and two, like you guys are also saying, it allows you to give experience to the group, which again encourages them to want to accept the GM intrusion rather than deny it.
I think, then agreed, Al, 100%. I would add to that it's also an excellent teaching tool. It allows you to kind of, get your players to understand what kind of GM you are and what the expectations are going to be throughout the adventure. So I think, by using your GM intrusions to basically teach your players, what's going on in your world or in the world, I think it's awesome in that respect.
I will let Eric finish it, but I think the best utilization of a GM intrusion to me is that calm moment in the game when you think you defeated the big bad, like the sun is setting, everything is calm, and then you hit them with that last intrusion of the day that changes the entire narrative, changes everything. It's great for that cliffhanger moment, that oh shit moment, like, well, everything is calm and bam, this is happening. I think that the GM intrusion mechanic is perfect for certain changes in the narrative to, like inject incitement into a boring scene, or not necessarily boring, but into a scene that the excitement is slowly dying down into. So I would say that that's probably the best utilization of the GM intrusion mechanic to me.
So for me, it's two parts, but they're brief. I think the number one thing it does for me as a GM and for new GMs that I've taught is it allows when they make their... I teach accordion GMing where you build all your set pieces, and depending on time, you chop down what you have and don't have. GM Intrusions really lets you take that note card that you write out and go, now is the time for this, and play it and go, hey, during this scene, X happens. And it also allows you to offer experience to them for the players to want to engage in it. Now, you do have to train your players to understand that failing isn't bad. The drama from a GM Intrusion is just a scene change or a moment or momentum. The second part of it, I think that is really awesome, is it allows you to, as the GM, become the director, and it lets you have a voice back. So you can take from your players, take their ideas, and then come back to them with an idea of what you want to have happen. Other games, you have to learn to do that, and there's dice usually involved around it. And the narrative part, as a storyteller at heart, slows down dramatically when you don't have something like Intrusions. My buddy, Tony, just said he added GM Intrusions to Starfinder because it was such a great way for him to go, oh God, I can just, I've been given the okay to change this whenever I want. So I think it's, I think more than a tool in the game, it teaches a GM how to take over their game and take control back when needed.
That makes what you said made me think of a question. I've heard this argument before. The GM that says, "Oh, hey, I do that anyway. Why do I need a mechanic that allows me to do that?"
Are you asking me to answer that?
Yeah.
So why do you need a mechanic for it anyway? Well, one, when there's a mechanic and you are playing a game with people who aren't your weekly players at your house, that lets them know to look out for it, and they're already trained. If you're playing with a group at a convention and you sit down to run a game and I'm running D&D and I suddenly say, hey, I do GM Intrusions, they're going to tell me to get the fuck out of here. Because I'm doing something that's like a house rule, a home brew, something I've cooked up in my head because it sounds good. Cypher System, they put it in, and that means that the GM has the liberty to use that, and it's built into the mechanic of the game. Because think of this, Cypher System without GM Intrusion means that your players just do what they want.
And with that, that's a perfect lead-in to our next question. Is
I didn't even see these.
How do you think the GM Intrusion mechanic changes gameplay?
I'll feel.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dean.
I'll feel that one. And it changes gameplay in the sense that, you know, it doesn't. You don't just rely on dice. It's not just about dice anymore. You know, it doesn't make a difference, you know, just how hot the dice are. It also makes you realize that you don't have to worry, you know, whether it's a natural 20 or a natural 1 on the die. You know, a GM Intrusion can happen anywhere in the game throughout. And it doesn't, and again, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing to have a GM Intrusion. It just means something else is getting ready to happen. Mm-hmm. So I think it helps shift your thought process as a player, you know, to realize that, okay, I'm in control, but not completely. And it shifts your thought process as a GM to go, you know what, like Erik said, give me that back. I got it. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's what I love about it. I think that's awesome.
It's a teaching tool for new GMs, and for old GMs, it gives you the liberty to do it. It's amazing. It's such a simplistic tool.
Yeah, and my what I was gonna say, it harks back to what Erik was saying, where it lets you what you call it? Oh, I lost my train of thought, guys. Someone else take over.
I was gonna say that you know, Cypher System at its core is a resource management game. You know, whether it's using points from your pool, from your
players, definitely.
Yes. With the GM, you actually giving the player another resource, you know, and the option of taking this XP. And so, you know, if they want to utilize that resource for re-rolls or character advancement, they're going to constantly want intrusions. So it changes the mindset of the player to, you know, normally players would get upset when a GM in a traditional RPG is constantly changing, you know, the way the story is going. But in Cypher System, it's a little different. or at least the players I play with, they kind of relish the fact, yeah, give it to me, bring it. I want that XP. I want to advance my character. I want those re-rolls. I want to use player intrusions. So it's another resource that gets traded between the GM and the player. And I think that I was going to say, I think that's important in the actual gameplay.
It's a pacing mechanic. It is 100% a pacing mechanic, not only for your story, but how quickly level up in D&D, but tier up in Cypher System. It lets you control when it's going to happen. Yeah, we can use milestones, just go, yo, you get 4 points, put it in. But this lets you give it to them, and then it allows them to also decide when those experience points need to be used for something else, which we'll discuss later. Is there a question here for the problems with it at all? Because I do have
that's actually the next question.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I have a solution for the problem. I won't say there's a problem without an answer.
Do you want to chime in now?
I did remember. So it just harked back to what you were saying about how it helps with the narrative pacing. You actually brought it back up. When, let's say you're playing another system, let's say D&D or whatever have you, and the players are engaged in the scene. Maybe they're fighting something, maybe they're negotiating with somebody, whatever have you, right? And you, as the GM, want someone to sneak up on them without them knowing. In Cypher System, you can say, hey, here's a GM intrusion. Suddenly, your characters were really caught up with what they're doing. You guys have been beset upon.
Ninjas.
In another system, like let's say D&D or whatever have you, the players might get upset at that. It's like, why didn't we get a chance to roll to detect them? Like, it really slows things down, and really, again, it kind of takes away your narrative control a little bit, because even in action movies like Marvel or whatever have you, when the heroes or whatever have you are caught up in something, they can be caught off guard. Even the most competent perceptive hero can be caught off guard in these narrative moments.
It lets you stage the scene where Daredevil gets jumped.
Exactly.
There it is.
That's all I was gonna say.
Did everybody answer this question?
Yeah, yep. I think so.
All right, so this goes into the our next question is, what are some of the problems or pitfalls with this mechanic? I'll go first because it kind of leads into what Al said. Okay. Al's example is a perfect example of, in other systems, players tend to take agency as an important thing, and the GM intrusion mechanic gives the impression that the GM can take agency away from a player. And I wouldn't say bad GM, but an inexperienced GM would sometimes utilize this mechanic as like a critical fumble table. Mm-hmm. Like, every GM intrusion is going to be something negative, and it creates a fear and a distrust between the player and the GM that every time an intrusion is being implemented, it's something negative.
But that's no different than other games where GMs are constantly telling you, no, you don't do that, you do this. It's just a different version of that.
Yeah, but it's all... I agree, and to some extent,
they need to train you better for the GM intrusion.
Yeah, and it's also the actual in-game, like when you play with a lot of D20 players, and you say, hey, I got a GM intrusion, I'm changing the narrative. A lot of times, immediately, they think of the worst-case scenario. So, it's like, hey, no, he's going to, rock falls, everyone dies, we're all doomed.
They're a little bit of a trust fall. They really are.
Well,
so that could definitely be a pitfall.
Well, going along that same line, the abuse of power.
And that actually is a very valid point. Abuse of power. That was actually what I was going to talk about, but not that GMs abuse their power. It's just that for inexperienced or new GMs, having that power is a little bit intimidating. They might feel like they're too powerful or too in control of the player's agency, where I can understand that aspect of it. They don't want to feel like, again, that they're taking away that agency, but the flip side is, again, it pushes the players to drive towards the point you want them to go to. It's not really taking away their agency, because they still have a say in what they're doing going forward. You might just be changing their direction, and on top of that, they also get the EXP, which drives their character forward. And again, it can be a little intimidating to throw those GM intrusions out there when you don't really quite know how they work or how to properly utilize them. But the only way to really get better at them is to do them.
Good point.
I mean, that's a great point. It's also, I think, a new skill that a GM needs to add to their arsenal, which is probably could also be considered another problem. That's a great point.
It's a retraining. You're retraining something you've done before, but you actually have a mechanic for it now.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's just the biggest thing. You know, people get so set in their ways. I think that's probably the biggest problem when it comes to the concept of GM intrusion, because it's something that, you know, you hear people say, well, I do this all the time, or you hear other people who are like, well, this is stupid, or it's just changing the perception. And I think that's the problem. We don't, enough of us don't try to look at, you know, games from how they were written as opposed to how we would want to interpret it. Yep. And I think that might be one of the biggest pitfalls or problems with this particular concept of mechanic in the game.
You see it in indie games all the time where they're teaching you a new way to run a game and you just don't do it because you're so used to running D&D or Pathfinder or whatever. But my big problem isn't that. My big problem is the thing that this statement we just read doesn't even talk about. And it's the fact that you are handing out experience, and it is one pool of experience. And it's the same experience you use to tier up. It's the same experience you use to do narrative injection and what you want to use. And it's the same experience you use to buy magical items. And it's the same experience you use to buy ciphers, and so on and so on. My problem is people are afraid to use the experience you give them because they want to tier up. It's the power growth problem. It's here's the carrot, but I don't want to use it for anything besides tiering up. Like, well, you could use experience to stop what's going on. Nah, I'll just wait for another GM intrusion. I can be tier 4 by the end of this. That shit sucks. It sucks. And it comes from the poorly trained mentality of the experience grind. Like, I don't know if you guys remember this, but D&D, gold used to equal experience.
Yeah.
And that is where that comes from. Core, like mechanically, like disarming a trap was experience. So the GM intrusion, while great as a tool, I really wish they had put a variability in it and how it functions. Myself, when I run it, GM intrusion experience cannot be used to tier up. Period. Can be used for anything else under the sun, but not tiering up. And then I give out important discovery experiences we play. And what brought me to that is Numenera, when it first came out, I read it, and it says that you only got experience for discovery and finding things. GM intrusion still gave experience. I was like, well, that doesn't link up well because they're the same pool that they're pulling from. So that's my biggest problem for it, is that it's one pool that an intrusion gives. Divide it. Your life will be way easier.
It is definitely something that gets touched upon constantly on the Discord server. People are always talking about how they separate the pools, how they might use milestone tiering up, and then the EXP earned is just for purchasing things.
When we ran Numenera West Marches, we divided it for that specific reason, because we could tell a GM you can only give out 4 discovery XP for tiering up, and then you could give out to 6 intrusions during a 4-hour session. So we don't care when you do it, you just get 6. And that allowed us to kind of mechanically make a variable of how much people were going to get.
Yeah, I actually was a big proponent against separating the XP, you know, because for me, it worked. It worked for me, but I realized thematically that it didn't work for everyone, and it especially didn't work for most players. So I ended up, you know, doing the same thing, you know, at my table, you know, I just renamed it. I give out a gold and platinum EXP. You know, gold EXP is in-game use. Platinum EXP is your tiering up. You know.
You see,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I can see the value of both points, but like I said, I always view Cypher System in general as resource management, and that's it's just another resource that. It's actually giving players additional options, because you, like, if you don't want to re-roll, like I'm a player personally that I never really care about re-rolling ones or failures anyway. So if I want to hoard my XP for advancement, that should be my prerogative. Like, to be honest, and for the other player, the other way around, if a player likes immediate satisfaction and success and using his XP to re-roll things, that should be his prerogative as well.
Let me take it one step further, though. Then that's so okay. You want to hoard your experience, that's great.
I'm saying if I wanted to, you know what I mean?
Sure, good for you. Okay, so now you're out tiering the party, and now you're tier 3, and everyone else is like tier 1.5. That becomes a balance problem. Hardcore for long-term campaigns. One shots, I tell people, don't save your experience. It doesn't mean shit. Spend it. But when you're running a long-term campaign, even 6 sessions, that matters. The problem is this: if Cypher System is your first system,
you see,
there is no problem.
It doesn't matter.
No, hold on. Technically, it isn't a. Let me finish with Dean. Technically, it isn't a balance problem because you can't use that. You can't advance to the end of the session anyway, and I would argue it's the GM's job to balance the story out anyway. So,
but if I give out 15,
your problem, not mine.
Let's see. Hold on. Let's say I give out 12 XP over the course of 2 sessions.
Yeah.
You hoard it all and never use it, but the guy next to you spends 8 of it. And he does it to save your ass. Or he does it to inject narrative into the game, or he does it to buy a Cypher. There needs to be a balance. It doesn't...
but what I'm saying is that I totally, like I said, I'm on both sides of the spectrum. I totally get what you're saying.
That is obvious.
But I could also see that the other player that's going to be like, hey, I'm only going to...
I can too. You're wearing the shirt where they belong.
Those people have a right to exist.
Look, I'm speaking specifically as an asset manager. I'm specifically speaking as an asset manager because it is a problem.
Let me say it like this.
Oh my God.
Okay, I have looked at this, like I said, backwards, forwards, up and down. I was a firm believer, like I said before, in the whole idea.
Got a squirrel crawling in? What's going on?
Yeah, I got a big squirrel problem.
Oh boy.
All right, but like I said, it's always been one of
Someone's
those
watching
things.
TikTok and just dropped the towel.
It was always one of those things. Like I said, I was with Anthony. Overall, I didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. I just realized that within the game, that ended up becoming a problem because I had one player who he out-tiered everybody. And it really wasn't an issue with balancing the game. It was the fact that he had way more resources early on in the game than everybody else. Everybody else
trains the other players to do the same shit.
Everybody else wasn't useless, but this guy could just do so much more because he had more gear. You know,
so
if you
have to train a party to do what you want, and you're already giving them a totally different system than any other D20 mechanic that is out there. Period, because it has a lot of the narrative style of indie developed games. The problem, besides just the growth issue, is that it causes a trend and other players start to follow that, and your game now never uses all this other cool stuff that experience can do. That sucks.
For the record, I'm not against...
You D&D me again, I swear to God.
For the record, it's a misconception that I'm against what you guys are saying. I'm just busting chops, and that actually leads perfectly into the next question.
He's actually against us.
What are some of the misconceptions with this mechanic?
Well, why don't you start this since you have the misconception of being right now?
I think the biggest misconception is that all GM intrusions have to be negative.
Right.
Agreed. Yes.
I mean,
agreed.
Hands down. Not only that, we hear that conversation.
Don't tell them it's going to be positive.
Yeah.
Don't tell them.
No, you don't. I mean,
that's a good question. Do you state the intrusion beforehand?
Nope. I say I'm going to do a GM intrusion. Are you interested? Unless I play out a scene and I say, this is how it's going to play out. Are you interested? I have done that as well, little blades in the dark. Just depends on what I'm doing.
Yeah,
if I'm doing...
Go ahead, dude.
I would say if I'm doing just an intrusion, I don't get a 1 or anything like that. I give them no clue whatsoever. You know, now if I get a 1, if I get a free GM intrusion, I get a 1. I'll play it up. You know, I'll torment them, and it won't necessarily be a bad thing that's coming.
I was just gonna say, you know, that I never knew by Raw that it's supposed to be the other way around. That you're supposed to state the intrusion.
Correct. What it is?
Yeah, what it is. You're supposed to say, and then ask them whether. But to me, that defeats the whole purpose of a GM intrusion.
It depends on how I'm telling the story, though. So, like, if I have someone who's hyper intelligent, that Sherlock Holmesy feel where he can see the fight taking place before anything happens, I'd use that as my GM intrusion for a player. Or someone who's a really good glaive, or someone who's good at combat. I'll play out the scene for them and go, by the way, I have a GM intrusion for you, and it's this. And they'll go, no. I am too good for this. Here's my experience. Because I want a fish experience out of it. Yeah. Because I find if they start spending it, the train gets rolling, everybody spends it, except for that one guy in the corner, like you, who doesn't spend it.
Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt up.
I'm not kidding. It was a person in a Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt when I was doing it. That's why it's hilarious.
Oh, man.
It was the Target one with the white lettering.
Also, too, don't you guys think that if you have positive intrusions, why are you going to state it beforehand? It kills the surprise. Like,
you can you can say a statement, and they won't know if it's positive or negative until you finish it.
Yeah, I always just thought it was weird that by Roy you're supposed to state the intrusion. We never did that.
Do we talk about it all? The different styles of intrusions? Does that come up in this conversation?
Not yet.
What, player intrusion or GM intrusion?
No. The different aspects of intrusion, like horror intrusions.
Oh no, actually we didn't.
Okay. I mean, that's another optional thing, but, you know, we can't touch on it, I guess. I mean, it is, because they're optional. We don't have to use them, but again.
I think that some of the best intrusions, Dean, you used horror in the last game we played, which I love. The incremental creep of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, right. You can still succeed, but intrusion still happens no matter what. Love that. But what is the one that you get where there's ciphers that you get that are not physical objects? What are those called?
Manifest.
No, it starts with an I think.
Subtle ciphers.
Subtle cipher, that might be what it is. Yeah. I have used those as GM intrusions and never told people I was giving them a cipher.
Oh yeah.
And I will give them that subtle cipher, like a clue or something, and be like, it's a GM intrusion. Here's what it is. Like, you learned something. It's horrible. Like, you learned that your mother actually killed your father in this scene, but you did get the clue and you know how to take it to court. I've done that where you it's like a 1-for-1 trade. That's pretty cool too.
Like an inspirational cipher, inspiration, sort of like, here's a Benny, you know?
But misconceptions, I think the biggest misconception period for me is GMs thinking that a GM intrusion needs to be so harmful because they're getting experience. That's the biggest misconception on the GM side of the table. And then I think on the written rule side, it's we're actually supposed to state it before we give it to them. I think I don't totally agree.
I don't do that.
I don't. Well, one other misconception is, I kind of touched on it earlier, is that using a GM intrusion completely strips player agency, which it doesn't. Like, again,
it doesn't though, because you have to give an experience to say no.
That's what I mean. Like, there's that option to say no for the players, but again, if they don't have experience, they don't have that option. So again, afraid of taking away
D&D nerd does.
Well, here's the other thing though, Al. You make a valid point, because you're not stripping agency, especially if you start using your GM intrusions like they're supposed to be used. Like we said before, they're not always negative. They're story elements. You know, I'll give an example of a great one I watched. Like I was asking you guys before, I don't know if I asked you if you watched Amazing Stories, the remake. And in one episode, there's a man and a woman trying to escape through a time portal, and they have a specific thing they have to do. And, you know, they're trying to get away and they're being pursued. Well, a beam falls and pins the guy. You know, GM intrusion right there. That was a GM intrusion. Now, everybody, oh my God, that's so negative. He didn't get... No, actually what it did was it changed the narrative, because he found his real place, his rightful place in the story. It was awesome. It was a great twist. And it added such a dynamic to the ending epilogue that you're going, yeah. You know what?
There's a difference too, though. He got pinned in tabletop. He may get out of that situation.
Right. Well, that's the whole point. But the thing was, he had the opportunity to get out too. If we were looking at it in tabletop terms, you had to make a might defense roll to move the beam. he failed. These were the consequences. So the consequences weren't overt. It wasn't what he wanted initially, but it was a growth. So it was
the Voorhees look back. He wasn't there till you looked.
Right, and it was one of those things that, you know what, if we look at it as gamers, you know what, that would have been another twist in the story. That would have been another aspect of growth for the character, you know. So that's the kind of stuff I think is great.
Yeah. Do you have any misconceptions, Dean? Do you think there's any misconceptions for?
I think we all are in agreement that the biggest misconception is that they're negative.
I thought of another one.
Go ahead.
Another misconception is that there's a minimum and maximum number of intrusions one should do in a game, which is hogwash. There's some games where the players are RPing so well together, the story is flowing so nicely that you might just run 2 intrusions, a group intrusion, and one individual intrusion.
But that's the difference between an experienced Cypher GM and an inexperienced. An inexperienced should limit themselves just until they're comfortable, so they are not abusing their power. Like, I mean, this is my reference, but when you take someone shooting for the first time, you don't load the entire magazine or clip. You give them 1 until they're comfortable. Same thing for XP. Only give them 1, 2, 3, 4 times that you want to use it in a system. But then once you realize, oh, my players are spending it, I can give more. That's different. When players are spending it, I always give more, and I say that out of the gate. If you spend your experience, I will give you more experience. If you don't, you're gonna die.
But at the end of the day, because that's an argument that happens all the time, that like trying to tell a GM that there's a set number, there is. It's whatever you feel comfortable doing. That's a misconception that we definitely happens.
Yeah, there is a guideline within the raw, like that says like 1 per player per like session or whatever have you. But it's
you know how hard that is to track?
It's just like
you
Anthony
better be doing
said,
group intrusions only.
That the flow of the story is what matters the most, and if the players are doing it, then there's really no need for it.
That leads us into our second part of intrusions, which are player intrusions. So Erik is gonna kindly read us the book definition.
I wouldn't use that word in front of my name, but okay. Book definition, page 412, revised CSR. Player intrusions give the players a small bit of narrative control over the world. However, the world still remains in the GM's purview. You can always overrule a player's intrusion or suggest a way to massage it so it fits better into the setting. Still, because it is indeed narrative control, a player intrusion should always involve a small aspect of the world beyond their character. I punch the foe really hard is an expression of effort or perhaps character ability. My foe slips and falls backward off the ledge is a player intrusion. Player intrusion should never be as big as a GM intrusion. It should not end an encounter or perhaps provide the PC with a means to more easily end an encounter. They should not have a wide-reaching or even necessarily a long-term effect on the setting. A way to consider this might be that the player intrusions can affect a single object. A floorboard snaps. Feature, there's a hidden shallow spot in the stream to the forward, or NPC. It is totally different than a GM intrusion. Totally. It's a lesser version of a player interaction with the story without a dice roll. That's how I've always explained it to my players.
Yeah. With that,
and we've been doing this since Numenera, because I was like, why don't players get this?
So many people have been doing it. We've been doing this since the first time I read. Me and Al, the first time we read the Numenera book was, hey, why isn't there a player version? And
we used to charge 2 XP.
Yeah.
It was funny. No, it was just funny because when I met these guys, that was the first thing we talked about. I'm like, oh yeah, I do player intrusions. They're like, we do. It was like, okay.
I mean, we didn't call it player intrusions, but I forget. I don't even think we called it anything.
Narrative control, I think is what we called it.
It was just something that players could spend EXP on.
Yeah, players used to spend XP. I want to spend 2 XP to do this.
And again, going back to the questions we're asking about, the mechanics, the first one is, what do you like about the player intrusion mechanics? And I think we're all in agreement here is that it gives that player that little bit of control that's missing in other systems that they can't really access according to mechanics, as well as Cypher System.
Well, they had it originally.
Numenera had it. Well, they didn't have it initially, but one thing I really dig about it though is when Monty Cook finally did add it into the game, they kind of narrowed the focus, which made it, it made it, kind of a good viable laser pointer for players, because I like the way they gave the examples, like for all the different types, glaives, glaives always had something to do, they knew a weapons guy, or, stuff like that.
That's a portion of the description, just so I could put it out there, is that was a portion of the definition that I didn't put on here, because then Eric would have been speaking for 10 minutes, because it basically it's long. It basically breaks down every character type and gives examples of what a proper intrusion is for that character type. And essentially what the player intrusion is, it has to make sense with your character type. So warriors could do might-based things, speakers could do, social
interaction
stuff. Yeah.
So I think that's a really cool aspect of it. That's something I really dig about it.
Well, so in Numenera First Edition, I think that's what everybody calls it at this point. You could spend experience to change narrative.
Yes.
But it wasn't called a player intrusion. It didn't have the depth of field that this does.
Yeah, that's also an original CSR. You could like pick up a skill, a minor skill.
Like, oh, there's a med kit here.
Yeah.
Like, what is the first question again, to make sure I answer this properly? Because I have a ton of thoughts on this.
What do you like about the player intrusion mechanic?
Makes them spend their experience. I'm dead serious. I love when players are interactive with the story, and this gives them a mechanic, because I have learned although Cypher doesn't use the GM screen, which is my favorite thing, but on one side of the screen, a GM has their rules, and the other side, the players have theirs, and this gives the players a mechanic to interact in the world in a way that a GM would in very minor ways, and it really puts their skin in the game. It makes them feel like they have narrative over it. I have always called it canonizing, like you are adding canon to the game by going, oh, well, yeah, but Chondro, he's one of our friends, remember? Experience point. And that stuff's amazing.
Yeah.
I think for me, it fosters creativity, and it kills the, because when you have an ability to spend an XP and to utilize your character to change the narrative slightly, it makes you think of creative ways to connect those two. So it kills the mindset of thinking strategically, and you start thinking narratively. Like, how would my character put his imprint on this story, without I'm shooting them one more time? Or,
it breeds new GMs.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That actually is an excellent segue. Unless you guys want to talk more about what you like, into the next question is, how do you think this mechanic is best utilized? Because this is what I love most about it, and it's again, I think it's the best way to utilize it as a player, is it lets you kind of broaden, or like, I'm struggling to word this right. It lets you really flesh out your character. Like, you can like use your character's background in your player intrusions. Like, again, like Eric was saying, oh, remember, I'm actually friends with this guy. He was like my uncle's carpenter or something. Like, you can make up something that becomes canon within the story, and again, it helps you. Again, what Anthony was saying with the creativity, it helps you think more in depth about your character and what they might do in a situation, or how they might benefit or have a benefit in that situation. And I think that's just awesome.
And me and Al, we're on the same sheet of music, because that's literally what I was going to say. One of the things I was going to say about it was that, for me, as a GM, I used to always ask my players to write me a background, give me a background story. And because Cypher System builds itself on a narrative anyway, player connections and all this kind of stuff, it makes my job even easier, because now if you wrote a background story, you can have that background story yourself sitting there, and those little aspects that you put in, those nuances, you can throw that in as a player intrusion. Remember, my sister is a mathematician, and she works at the university.
Let's go see her.
So like you say, bringing the character's background, fleshing it out, and the biggest thing that I love about it the most is that now the players actually have a stake in the world. You know, they have a stake in the world, and they're helping build the world. It becomes a give and take in the world building aspect, which I totally and utterly think is great.
But what would be a great example of, as a GM, of, wow, this person did a really good player intrusion?
I mean, I think
like how it's been used in a game.
Yes, like just like a random example.
In the superhero game, in the Unmasked game that we were playing, your character, the young Republican, what was it? I can't remember what your character's name was.
I don't remember his name. The Heater was his
superhero name. But remember when you guys got invited to the sorority party and you used the player intrusion to help I can't remember the guy who was playing with us, but you used the player intrusion in order, because he was awkward and not functioning in the party aspect. And you used the player intrusion to kind of like be his wingman to bolster him, which was really cool. That was a really cool use of a player intrusion. I would have never, thought anybody would do that. But you gave up the XP, and that was pretty good.
I think mine was people flexing their powers to go beyond what they normally do. There's already rules to do that for intellect-based powers, was it 3, 5, 7 or something like that, and you spend extra points. But I've had people do it where he was, I think, so the setting we're playing in is a soul punk setting with a lot of spirits and ghosts. And he used it, instead of talking to one, he's like, hey, I spent an experience. Can I speak to the crowd of ghosts and spirits that are here as a conduit? I don't care what happens to me afterwards. And it was that last part where I was like, absolutely. If you don't care what happens to you afterwards, for sure. And he ended up being touched by them all in a way that his background changed. And I don't know if we're going to talk about how story arcs work, but it tagged a new story arc to him where he's now a vessel for spirits, and it was easy for other people to talk to him. But he made that by spending an experience point. I could have forced it upon him, and I probably would have anyway, but he came up with it on his own, which made him way more excited about it. I love when that kind of stuff happens. Not just, well, I'm looking for a med kit, couldn't find one. There's one here now. I spent an experience point.
I think that's what I was going to lead to. My example.
I always say yes. There is. There's a blowtorch. Get on it.
I was running a game of the Warriors. The '70s gang, and
I didn't get to play in.
Yeah, it was so fun.
You weren't around.
Yeah, but the players stole the police car, and we had someone spend an XP to have the police radio on the entire time, so everyone knew that it was the Warriors that did it.
Oh my lord!
That it was an intrusion that was actually negative towards them, but it made sense for his character, because his character was one of those boastful, hey,
that is amazing.
I am the baddest gangster, there is out there, and I want everyone to know. That was a perfect example of a player intrusion.
Yeah,
I give that dude extra experience.
That was actually awesome. It was the guy playing James Reaver's character. Remember?
Yeah. Actually, it was Doc. Doc that did that.
Oh, it was? Yeah, it was. Okay.
Doc Palindrome.
That was Jesse.
He runs a podcast called The Lounge.
He's awesome. But what I was gonna say about good player intrusions, even though I don't know the specifics because y'all did it in secret, when we were playing in Dean's game on stream the other day, y'all did a bunch of player intrusions in secret that, again, I don't know much of the details of because y'all were doing it in DMs. But the fact that it changed the narrative quite a bit for the ending was awesome, again. And it had the players, or you guys, the players, were trying to basically not control the ending, but change the ending to have your characters have an impact on it.
I wanted to change it in a horrible way.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
For the record, Dean still owes me 1 XP because he took my XP to do my thing.
But
I'm still bitter.
I just spent that XP. I thought it was party XP.
but the fact that
and scene
that the player intrusions can do that sort of thing is just awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, that's perfect. It leads into our next question is, how does this mechanic change gameplay?
Oh, I mean, we just go back
Didn't we
to
just
what I
answer
just
that?
said. Yeah, it's like, it,
Well, I mean, as a game master, that
less
mechanic, that mechanic right there is a blessing and a curse all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been playing long enough. Excuse me. I've been playing long enough that I look at it as a blast. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. Give them to me, because you know what? I'm gonna twist the story. You know, because that's the whole thing about a narrative game, and you know, being a bit improvisational. Yep. You want to be able to flex your creative muscle, and you know, you guys.
It's an improv's dream, man.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. So playing with you know, a group of people who want to use their player intrusions and, you know, spend their XP like that, especially in a one shot, it just makes, you know, whatever thing I was doing, it makes me jump off the rails, and I dig it. So.
I mean, it except for, you know, indie games and newer games, it allows the player to have some control of the narrative, which is refreshing. You know, so it definitely changes gameplay in that aspect.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of the best things that they added outside of story arcs, because I'm a huge Marvel Heroics fan, and I love the story arc stuff. But I think really what it did for my tables, either at conventions when you explain it well, and you really get into it with them, or at my home tables, is it made groups be creative together. Because when one person had an idea, the rest would try to help dogpile. And it's the first time that dogpiling worked, and it wasn't just, oh, he failed his perception check. Well, I'm going to make my perception check as well. This was a dogpile, and it was like, oh, that's a great idea, and we should do this with it. And the whole group just goes. And you just sit back and go, oh, my God, I'm not running the game anymore. It's amazing.
The game is running itself.
Yeah. And that's a well-oiled machine, man. Like, that is bar none.
It's a great feeling. To say the least.
Now we talked about the positives. Let's touch on the negatives. What are the
players don't know how to use it?
Problems and pitfalls.
Yeah, players don't know how to use it. It's too new.
Or if they don't know how to use it, or they try to abuse it. You know, you always have the guy that wants to, you know, just, you know, well, I'm going to use an intrusion, and I can. Well, guess what? I can deny your intrusion. So.
Or you're constantly having to go, no, Johnny, no. You can't blow the car up because you want to.
So you think that players' tendency is to ask for too much?
No, I think they're... Go ahead.
I wouldn't say it's a player's tendency. Well, it's like what Eric said. They don't know how to use it.
They're not GMs.
They don't get that this is a small, subtle thing, that you're supposed to be doing something personal. You know, that you're calling down that prime examples, like, again, we can go to our movies. You know, what was it? Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Clark Gregg's character, you know, Agent Coulson. Or even in the Marvel movie, he's the perfect example of player intrusion. Oh, here's my card. You know, just that moment to throw you off enough that you're going to listen to what he has to say. You know, things like that. As opposed to, you know what? I'm going to destroy Thanos.
We have the right weapon to kill him because I spent an experience point. It's like, no, maybe if you all spent an experience point, I'd be okay with that. But there's the boundaries aren't set really well. I will say, after reading that, it's described better than I remember, but I don't think players understand the difference between improving the story and trying to win through using experience.
I mean, since you say that, I'm going to ask this question, because this question came up on the server, and I know my answer. I wasn't pro, but I'm really curious to see what the three of you think. Somebody was asking...
Wait, you came up with this?
Yeah, it was a question of...
I don't like it already.
Come on, you love to see you. But one of the questions was, someone was asking, would it be okay, or would you accept someone to use a player intrusion to interrupt in the middle of combat to do an additional attack? And initially I said, yeah, you could do it. But the more I thought about it, I said, what stops people from spamming now? Just wasting XP to get additional strategical, combat advantage. I don't think I'm a
combat,
fan of that.
no. But I've had someone spend an experience to monologue in the middle, and that was amazing.
Yeah, but that doesn't directly affect
Yeah. So
a fight scene.
Well, I look at it this way. There's two schools of thought with that. Because I tell you how I mean if I had to, how I would handle it, especially if they tried to spam it like that. Okay.
No, I'm not saying the person said they were going to spam it. I'm just saying that as a GM, that would be my initial thought. Like,
right.
Hey, if you start allowing one person to do this, you're going to have the whole table just wasting the XP on trying to get additional attacks.
You treat it like the horror mechanic. It should be setting specific.
Well, but or it could be setting specific, or you could actually, like I said, a thing that I would do with it would be like, okay, you know what? You guys are spamming that. Guess what? I'm going to spam my use of GM intrusions. Or I mean, I
don't know if I agree with that because that's
so. But Dean, you have that wushu setting that you're building right now with the shadow and the light. In a setting like that, where you're really getting into like combat being something that is where the camera gets in close or Born Identity style, I think in those moments I might let someone do it because it makes sense for the setting we are playing. If he does really well and stabs somebody and he wants to follow through by putting him into a chokehold, he wants to spend an experience, I might be okay with that. But if I'm playing a horror setting, go fuck yourself. There's no way I'm going to let you spend an experience to get an extra action because you're dying in a horror game.
Well,
I think it's setting specific. Just like I wouldn't use the horror mechanic in a superhero game unless that villain is a nightmare villain.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's exactly that. As long as it makes sense for the character that's attempting it and the situation / setting at hand, I think it's perfectly okay. Because even if they end up spamming it, quote unquote, they're using all their EXP just to attack more, which is kind of shitty, if that makes sense. Like, you could be using it for much better things. So if character want to use it to be more like a combat heavy person, then if that's how they want to run it,
they should just use effort and pools for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And here's another thing with that too, Anthony. Now that we were talking about it, kind of broadens the scope. That probably wouldn't be something that I would let every character do anyway.
That's what I'm saying. That was the point I was trying to make.
That would be type specific. Yeah. If you're a combat monkey, okay, I can see the combat monkey blowing his XP like that. But just like Eric said, if somebody decided they wanted to throw an XP out there to monologue, in the midst of the combat,
which I would love,
absolutely.
But if you're playing Max Payne or Happy, where combat slows down and your heroes are able to do more, I might tell people, all right, we are in a action dramatic scene. XP, you can do extra attacks in this scene. I would definitely frame it so everyone knows it's all in or all out. And I think
that's a cool thing that you named it. The action dramatic. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Or we're gonna do bullet time.
Yep, bullet time. Yeah, it's perfect for Max Payne. Bullet time.
Yeah, we're gonna do bullet time.
Matrix bullet time. And so hacking is the same thing. Like when I'm running sci-fi games with hacking, and someone goes, "Dude, I have to get this done before everything goes sideways." I'm like, "Well, you can always spend an XP for another action." Like those moments, I love goading people into making decisions. Even if it makes them cry, it's still a good decision.
Does anyone else have any more problems before we move on to the last of the questions here?
I wish that Monty Cook Games put out a new playmat that had player intrusions on it and how they should be used.
It's not a pitfall, but it's definitely something that would be nice to have.
Just because it's explaining it doesn't work as well, and it's not on the character sheet, and I want it defined because after reading that, it definitely says you're not GM intrusion level, you're right here. And I kind of want examples like around the edge. I think that'd be awesome. Or cards.
I think that's probably the thing with the misconceptions.
Does the new playmat have player intrusions? I have one. It's still in the plastic though.
Well, you ask and thou shalt receive.
I'm sure. I don't think it does. I think it says you can do it.
Effects, damage, special armor, weapons.
I like the old one better. I like the art on the old one.
Nah, the new one is badass. And I like that it's way bigger.
I do like the size more. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not on there. You can keep looking.
No, but yeah, it's still got a lot of good information.
So that might have been one of the biggest misconceptions that it was on there, and that leads us into our next question. What are
if
some
there
of
was
the
little edge play mats for players that they could set down based on the setting you're in, and it just went around the edge? Sorry. Anyway.
What are some of the misconceptions of the mechanic?
So
More powerful than it really is.
Yeah. So a misconception is that it can become like an auto success. Like what the example Eric gave earlier, where it's like the player searched for a med kit, and I was like, oh wait, here's an EXP, I actually found one. That is really not how it should be played out.
That's called a reroll.
Yeah. You can use EXP to reroll to try to look again, but trying to force the success with player intrusion isn't really the scope. It's a misconception.
Yeah.
That's also one of the pitfalls as well, because I know a lot of people attempt that.
Yeah, I think that defining it is probably what has to be done. It just has to be defined. It definitely has to be put in parameters in your or at your table, because that's just it.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it isn't class based or is it type based. People think that they could just waste the XP to change the narrative like a GM intrusion. Like that it's the same concept as a GM intrusion, just that the players could do it, and it really doesn't work that way.
Does it say when you can use them? Is it only on your turn, or is it whenever?
It's whenever.
Whenever you can jump in whenever.
Okay, so you can use it for other people. There's no stopping.
Yeah.
I didn't think so, but I just wanted to make sure, because I realized that it's less than, because that's how I ran it, but I didn't remember it reading that way.
But it's also type specific. Remember that too. So it has to make sense for your type.
Even if
is it all three words or just type?
No, it's type.
I think the raw says type.
Oh, yeah. That's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, no, I definitely play it as long as it makes sense for your character as a whole, like your personality, like all that. As long as it makes sense for your character, yeah, you're good.
Like if I'm a smart glaive who wields two weapons, it should fall under all three of those.
Yeah,
right. Well, we do. I mean, I think
that's house rules, though. That's not wrong.
But I'm saying we're just saying rules is written, but versus that. But I think we all do that, because I mean, like I said, we've been using them for so long.
Well, my improvement is to use them for all three.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I guess Dean, you want to tell us why? Since I think we exhausted intrusion mechanic.
It is one of the best things that they added, though.
Yes,
we all agree
absolutely,
with that, right?
Hands down.
Favorite mechanic for me is effort and edge. I think it was brilliant. So the book definition, page 17 in the revised CSR says edge. Although your pool is the basic measurement of stat, your edge is also important. When something requires you to spend points from a stat pool, your edge for that stat reduces the cost. It also reduces the cost of applying effort to a roll. For example, let's say you have a mental blast ability and activated it costs 1 point from your intellect pool. Subtract your intellect edge from the activation, and the result is how many points you must spend to use that mental blast. If using your edge reduces the cost to 0, you can use the ability for free. Your edge can be different for each stat. For example, you could have a might edge of 1, speed edge of 1, and an intellect edge of 0. You will always have an edge of at least 1 in one stat. Your edge for that stat reduces the cost of spending points, and your might edge reduces the cost of spending points from your might pool, but it doesn't affect your speed pool or intellect pool. Once a stat's edge reaches 3, you can apply 1 level of effort for free. Effort. When your character really needs to accomplish a task, you can apply effort. For a beginning character, applying effort requires spending 3 points from that stat pool appropriate to the action. Thus, if your character tries to dodge an attack, a speed roll, and wants to increase the chance of success, you can apply effort by spending 3 points from your speed pool. Effort eases the task by 1 step. This is called applying one level of effort. You don't have to apply effort if you don't want to. And if you choose to apply effort to a task, you must do it before the attempt roll. You can't roll first and then decide to apply effort. If you roll poorly, I mean, you can't attempt to apply effort if you roll poorly. Applying more effort can lower the task difficulty further. Each additional level of effort eases the task by another step. Applying one level of effort eases the task by one step. Applying two levels of effort eases the task by 2 steps, and so on. However, each level of effort after the first costs only 2 points from that stat pool instead of 3. So applying 2 levels of effort costs 5 points. 3 levels of effort for the first level plus 2 for the second. Applying 3 levels of effort costs 7 points. 3 plus 2 plus 2, and so on. And since both these mechanics kind of go hand in hand, we will discuss them at the same time.
Can we start with misconceptions?
Let's do it.
Okay, good. Why is it called edge and effort? Why didn't you use 2 different words with different letters? Common misconception. They get confused all the time when you're teaching people.
It's definitely, I definitely have had people confuse them. Even like people who are, excuse me, not anybody who plays the system often. I've definitely heard them say effort instead of edge or edge instead of effort.
If it was called like reduction or something,
yeah,
for effort and edge, like or whatever, just E and R, E and A, E and anything is the biggest problem. People mess it up, and I think the other big problem is the fact that it's 3 the first time and 2 every time after that. Like everybody butchers that, and then edge comes off the total, not off of each one. That's the hardest mechanics in the entire fucking game.
All right, since we got a hold of Debbie Downer here.
No, those are the misconceptions.
D, why don't you tell us what you like about effort and edge since you picked it?
I'm assuming you guys agree with all those misconceptions.
No, yeah, definitely.
I definitely agree with the name. You know, they both starting with E. It just confuses me.
You know, I get it, but I kind of see. I guess I'm like a glutton for punishment in some areas. Because I kind of get it. You know, you have an edge in strength. You have an edge in speed. You know that is your edge. You know,
call it reduction.
I get it. You know, effort. Of course, you're putting in a little extra effort.
Right. I mean, what do you like about the mechanic?
What I dig about the mechanic itself is, for me, it simplified proficiencies. It simplified, you know, how much of a stat bonus I get.
Yeah.
It simplified all of that into a simple single mechanic. So guess what? I'm actually the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. I am the one in control of how much of a bonus I get. And it's all based on what my intestinal fortitude is all about, which I dig, or what my mental power, my willpower is, or, you know, how fast I might be. So for me, effort and edge were just like kind of a cool little godsend, you know, and it's also reflected in as you tier up, because again, you're in control of it. You know, you can get to the next tier and go, you know what, I got a might edge, but you know what, my character is, you know, I don't know, intelligent, inquisitive, intuitive, even better, intuitive. You know what, I think he needs a intellect edge now. So because he does these things, he's aware, his awareness, so on and so forth. Those things work for me, you know, and it again, I love the control that the players have in their characters in that sense.
Yeah.
What I really like about the mechanic is that it gives you that cinematic feel. You know, that when you're playing, like if your character, you know, everyone sees in the movies and stuff, like when somebody's life is on the line, they dig deep, they get that last little bit of energy. And that's how I picture it when I say, hey, my character's wasting all his effort to try to jump across this ravine. You see his sweat brow, you know, you see his heart pumping as he, leaps off the edge. And that's why I'm using effort. You know, it sort of enhances the cinematics of a game.
Yeah.
From a player's point of view. And I think it actually captures that really well. So I think that's what I like about the effort. And I think effort and edge, like I don't really see how edge is being used outside of effort much. So like I think it should have been just like one mechanic to begin with.
Well, edge also reduces how much your abilities cost too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
which is,
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's the other time you see it get
Shit
used
ends
a
up
lot.
being free, which is amazing.
Yeah, which is awesome. And that brings me to my point of what I like about Effort and Edge. Aside from the fact that it's super, like, it's really easy to understand and grasp and, implement in your games if you, learn it, practice it a little bit. But what I really like is that it really portrays that, like, within the sense of the game and its mechanics, what trying really hard does to your body, what it does to your mind. It makes you weaker. It makes it harder for you to do things further down the road. And it, again, with the resource management aspect and Effort and Edge, you get a real sense of, like, your character can push himself beyond the limits of what it can do. And it's all represented so well in these simple mechanics, and I just think it's awesome.
Agreed. 100%.
I was going to say, Eric, you want to say something nice about the mechanic before we move on to the next question?
You neededly tonight, Eric.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, so it is the reason I play the game, short of character creation. I love the 3 pools, and I think that for me as a GM, it allows me to offer up difficulties besides just a check. The idea of, you can lift that gate and hold it, but for every round you hold it, you're going to lose 2 might. Well, I have a 2 edge. Well, then you can hold it indefinitely as long as you want to do it. But any action you do outside of that is going to cost you might. They're like, oh gosh, this is going to be really hard. And they're one-handing holding it up and like beating someone's head into the torch holder. Those moments are great. And I think it probably took me about 10 sessions to really understand how much as a GM I could do with the pools and with edge. And I make sure my note card, like when we play D&D, we always have all of our note cards for like, what's your stealth? What's this? What's that? For mine, it is what edge they have in each one of the pools and what their pools are. And I just have that across the line. I don't care what you're proficient in. That's your problem. But I like knowing that stuff because I know how far I can push you until you're going to break. And it's different than hit points because you're spending them as well. Like you are deciding, just like when you should go in on blackjack or poker, is this the time for me to spend that 5 might? Is this going to put the guy down? Or is this going to solve the riddle we're trying to do because I, as the player, am too stupid to do it? Like, what's going to happen? The pools are great. I think they're fabulous and probably one of the best things in the system.
I also love, as a player, I love when I'm confronted in those scenes where I have to apply effort to abilities and pools that I don't have edge in.
Yes.
You know, like that scene where, I really need to dodge this because my might is down really low, but I still have a lot in my speed pool, but I don't have an edge in speed. So should I apply 2 levels of effort and lose 5 points from my speed pool?
Or the guy who comes out of left field and blows intellect and like solves this problem, or like, or wins that confrontation of wills, and he's like, no, I am spending 8 points because I am tier 2, and you can deal with it. Like those people, those moments are great.
Right. Well, I mean, Anthony, I think your summation of it was the best. Yours, actually, couple yours and ours together. The idea of the resource management. We're all movie guys. We all like our movies. We exist in a fantasy world.
Except for Al, he never watches them.
Well, Al watches anime, so
close your eyes.
But even in that, when you watch those movies and you get those moments, I mean, come on, we all grew up watching Rocky, and when he was fighting Ivan Drago, and at the end, come on, he's taking the hits, and you're like, yeah, that's what,
using might instead of speed,
right? And that's where effort and edge come in. That's where I see it so vividly, and I see that resource management too. What I was talking about, it's like, oh, you know what, Rocky, he saved his recovery roll. Boom, he rolled he got 8 points of recovery, and it's.
I wonder if I could run a boxing game.
Yes, you
definitely can. That would be awesome.
I'm thinking of Ippo.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So that's what I'm saying. I mean, that I think is just the brilliance of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
next part.
How do you think the mechanics are best utilized?
Well,
I think we kind of all answered.
I think we already beat that up.
Yeah, we kind of said it, you know.
So, what do you think? How do you think this mechanic changes gameplay?
Well, I love.
Mindset.
Yeah, it changes.
Go ahead, Al.
No, and what I was gonna say is that it changes gameplay in that in other systems, like let's say D&D, there's no real resource or way for you to say, hey, I want to try extra hard at this, unless I'm mistaken, because I'm not a big D&D guy.
No, you're right. There's not. Not currently.
So that in and of itself is just so awesome because it encourages the players, and I'm just gonna use this phrase because it's funny, to go beyond plus ultra. Like it pushes them to go beyond the physical limits of what their character can do, the mental limits, whatever limit you want to call it. It lets them go beyond the limits at the cost of their body. You know, it makes them like it's an endurance versus how much like they want to do. And I think it's an awesome for what Dean was saying, for that mindset. It really makes you think about how your character would do things in certain moments. Because again, do you want to apply effort? Do you want to like save that for later when it might be more crucial? And that again, it changes gameplay in such a huge way when it comes to, you know, like let's say Cypher System versus D&D, how the players can interact with the story and whatnot.
I think that Erik put it the best when he described the might-based character that could apply all the effort into intellect. You know, right. So it changes gameplay because it allows you to excel in a category or field that your character wouldn't necessarily be able to do. You know, just by at a cost, of course. You blowing through your intellect pool. You playing the, you know, dumb, brawny fighter. But there's that one scene where everybody else is, you know, shot and it's your time to shine, but it's an intellect-based challenge. Well, guess what? I'll put 3 levels of effort. I'll bring my intellect down to 2, and I'm going to give it a shot. You know? And there's not many systems that allows you to be that, like, open. Like, flexible. The gameplay to be that, flexible and open.
Yeah.
I mean, think sorry, Al.
No, I was
just saying that. Okay. We keep doing. Go ahead, Al. You go.
No, I was just saying that it's awesome because, like I was saying before, with the D&D comparison, in D&D, like let's say in Anthony's example, like everyone else is down or whatever or out of the scene, and it's an intellect or whatever charisma based thing, and the dumb brawny barbarian's going to do it. He's going to have -2 or whatever on his roll no matter what. Whereas in Cypher System, the same character has that chance to push himself beyond what he can normally do.
It lets you be the hero.
Exactly.
It 100% lets you decide when you have to be in the driver's seat, you're going to be in the driver's seat.
Well, think about
what makes it even better, though, is that it lets you be a hero at a cost. It's still
correct. Yeah, but
costs something.
Being a hero is a cost. Usually it's death.
Well, but that's what I mean. That's the good part about it.
Well, I mean,
that you paying a price to do.
But you have the chance to do it. You get to decide when you're better than when you were the scene before because you want to put the effort into it. The thing that is amazing is we talked about we kind of take player agency away with some of the other mechanics. This mechanic is what gives all the player agency back. It goes into your end, and then you have recovery rolls on top of it. There's so many things you can do where in other games it would be advantage or disadvantage, a favor, a token, maybe a boon. This lets you go, I don't need your help, GM. I'm just going to do it because I can.
Well, that's what I was trying to get to, was that when you look at this, the magic word is what Anthony said, cinematic. Mm-hmm. You're playing in a movie. Your character is the movie hero. And if you pay attention, no matter what movie we've ever watched, no matter what heroes we've ever watched, they all have their varying moments. I mean, look at John McClane in Die Hard. You know,
walking on glass.
You know, and if you think about it, the last scene in the movie was him actually using an intellect-based deception. Mm-hmm. You know, okay, I'm hurt, you know, and I had to pull it off. I had to roll
the duct-taped gun.
You know, exactly. I had to trick this guy to put him in the position I needed him in. You know, so
and then the production company spent effort and decided it was a Christmas movie.
Yeah, there you go.
But like, it's 100% like you're in the driver's seat when you use your pools, which is just awesome, and you take damage to them. It is the core thing that makes Cypher Cypher. It's not actually the single-use items. We've all had potions and wands. It's not the artifacts. It is the pool mechanic. It is what makes Cypher Cypher.
Easily, quite easily. But
what's next?
Yeah, that like some of the pitfalls, like other than the the names being a little confusing, I'm actually struggling to think of any problems or pitfalls.
I got one.
It's really easy to kill a player if you're not aware.
Oh, yep.
I don't know how much they've tracked.
My pitfall would be that it's easily mismanaged.
Yeah. Your players need to have beads or tokens or I like stacks. I love poker chips for it because you can look across the table and go, he's about dead. Let's push it. Or I'm gonna kill him if I do this again.
I got another one. A lot of new players tend to are scared to use effort because when you hear you have to take points out of your pool, they still have the mindset that it's HP. So they don't. No one ever wants to voluntarily damage themselves.
Right.
So it's hard to get somebody out of that mindset. So that's definitely a problem. Is changing their mindset. Hey, like this is resource management. You gotta, in order to advance and do cool stuff, you gotta give me something in return. And unfortunately, it's points from your pool.
It's your life.
Yeah, it's like the dark crystal. You're the crystal. And you just sapping energy from them.
Yep. But yeah, I think those are pretty much the most like.
Wait, I had a couple more. I'm trying to think of some other
problems.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily. It could be misconceptions as well, but I also know too that it's real easy to cheat the system with effort and edge, because unless you want to be that GM that's constantly like, I'm applying 3 levels of effort. Make sure you take it 7 points from your pool or whatever the number is. It's very difficult to manage as a GM.
I have a GM that I played with who tracks it all.
Yeah, I just use it.
I'm lazy, dude.
I am too.
I don't even have pants on right now.
I normally that's probably a holdover from my D&D days. That's probably a holdover from my D&D days because that's the one thing I do. I will put those scores there and everybody's scoring and just he did this and he did that. That's easy.
I'm trying to think of other flaws that I have with it. I mean, honestly, the naming convention, I joke, but that is the biggest problem I have teaching new people at conventions. I really wish that was just a different word. It's really all
I think mismanagement can become a thing, and I think that just comes with time. Mm-hmm. That people will learn how to manage their pools. I think, like Anthony was saying, it's either they're not going to use it or, they put themselves, in a bad situation. And I think with that, people also forget about their recovery roles.
Your options too. The amount of things you can do with pools are forgotten a lot. There's a lot of really cool options. Yeah. Like I spoke about earlier, when I'm running superhero games, or if I'm running Gods of the Fall, or I'm running even Numenera, they talk about it being the intellect pool where you can spend to do. If it normally is you only, you can go to the next level and affect someone else. And if it affects someone else, you want to go to the next only, you can affect other people. You can spend more. It's an optional rule, but those rules allow you to have like Avatar: The Last Airbender as your game.
I also remembered another one. People forget that you could split your effort, one to hit and one to damage.
Right.
And then you get the problem, which this happens with a lot of new players on the server, is that they'll say, I want to apply level effort to hit, right? Then after they hit, they'll be like, can I use the other effort for damage?
So here's a question then for Raw. If you split it, do you get your edge to both?
No. It's just to the one. It's because
do you get the pick?
It still counts as well.
Yes. It wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, it doesn't matter when because it's happening at the same time, really.
Yeah, it's happening simultaneously. You still spend
your edge. You got to remember, your edge is only going to reduce
the first level.
It's only going to reduce the cost of of
the first
of
level of effort.
whatever the first one is. So if you want to hit, or if you're, or
but if you use a power and stack effort onto it, and you use part of your effort to hit, part of your effort for damage, does the power get all the edge, and then the effort goes? That's what I thought.
It goes to the power first. So say if a power costs two intellect points, right, and you have 3 edge.
I'm asking this for people watching, not for me.
the first 2 goes to the power, then the one carryover goes to the level of effort.
I will say this, for anyone who really wants to know how it works well, they've tried to explain it through MCG, but there's one guy who used paper and numbers and plays it out on the table for Numenera. That mechanic hasn't changed. That is the best example of how the mechanic works in the game. Is he like does paper circles on a table? Like it's genius version. I would link that if you guys want. I would link that video. It's the best thing ever for this.
Geek and Sundry also did a pretty good explanation of the rules as well.
Yeah.
The Callisto 6 guys.
Hey guys, I really hate to do this, but I have to jump off camera for just a moment, or my bladder's going to explode. I'll be right back.
That's fine. You're good.
Well, let's start the next question without him.
I can hear you.
The next question would be the misconceptions of mechanic. I think we kind of touched on.
We nailed it.
Yeah, we definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's just that. Well, one misconception that I see at the table, at my table,
like a beholder,
is that they have to apply it constantly. Like sometimes they'll just be like, "Hey, I want to use effort for this roll, and then the next roll, and the next." Like, you know, it's not something you have to always use. Like,
but that's a learning experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a learning thing. Yeah. It's like what Dean was saying, becomes a mismanagement thing, and it just comes from time, how to manage, you know, when to use effort, when to not use effort, and all that.
Another misconception is that the effort and edge always gets wasted, and on a natural 20, you get all those points.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I always forget. You know, I always forget. I rolled a 20. I'm so excited that I rolled a 20.
As a GM, I remind them so I look like a hero before I beat them up. Not even kidding. I'm like, oh, by the way, don't forget, you get all those back. My friend Kelly played in the West Marches style Numenera. She played the one that could shoot like a plasma laser out. I can't remember what she was playing. And she rolled 20. It's like, you haven't spent any of your powers. She's like, I know. I'm like,
Anthony did that to me in a one-shot.
Yeah, that's miraculous, because I'm usually the worst roller at any table.
That is a misconception. That's a good one, actually. That is forgotten time and time again.
I personally forget it every game, and I just brought it up.
What's next?
So, are we done with effort and edge, so we can finally get to the
your favorite one? Yeah.
Least favorite.
Wait, just because yours.
Absolutely.
I think we can move on to that.
I think we skip it.
My favorite mechanic is power shifts. I know it's an optional rule, but screw you guys. I picked it anyway because it's my favorite mechanic.
Right.
It's on page 17 of the revised CSR. Actually, is it 17?
No,
I don't believe.
It's on page 17. That's real early. That's a core.
That's like 274, 77, if I remember.
We'll put the correction in the what you call it, description down below.
I'll look it up while you're failing through it.
I'm looking it up right now.
All right, cool.
All right. So superheroes can do things that other people cannot. They could throw cars, blast through brick walls, leap onto speeding trains, and cobble together interdimensional gateways in a few hours. It's tempting to say that such characters are stronger, faster, or smarter, so they should have higher might, speed, or intellect pools. However, bumping up stat pools or edge doesn't fully represent this dramatic increase in power. Instead, consider using an optional rule called power shifts. Under this rule, all superhero characters get 5 power shifts. Power shifts are like permanent levels of effort that are always active. They don't count towards a character's maximum effort use, nor do they count as skills or assets. They simply ease the tasks that fall into specific categories, which includes, but not necessarily limited to, the following: Accuracy, which all attack rolls, dexterity, acrobatics, initiative, and speed defense. Resilience, might defense rolls, and armor, +1 per shift. Single attack, attack rolls, damage, 3 additional points per shift. Strength, all tasks involving strength, including jumping and dealing damage in melee or thrown attacks, but not attack rolls. Healing, 1 extra recovery roll per shift, each 1 action, all coming before the normal recovery rolls. And I think that's all of them, right? Did I say intelligence? Because I skipped something.
Nope, intelligence.
Intelligence, intellect defense rolls, and all knowledge, science, and crafting tasks. Why do I love the power shift mechanic? Because it allows me to. First of all, I think the power shift mechanic works in so many genres besides supers. You want to do a spy game and you want to have a guy excel at only computers. Give him 1 power shift in intelligence and give him all his knowledge checks on computers is higher than a normal person.
It's power shift, yeah.
Yeah, or whatever. We'll call it science shift or stealth
We used it
shift.
for technology when we did spy games.
Yeah.
Tech was your power shifts.
Power shifts work in so many genres, not just supers. I think it's almost like underutilized in the system, to be honest with you.
I mean, there are games that I've run that I've just used them as, lower tier. You can't put more than 1 power shift, in an ability, but they exist, because to try to show that they were like upper echelon. Actually I used it in a martial arts action game that I ran. And that was what it was, the martial artists all were allowed to have 2 power shifts, but they couldn't put more than 1 in any one thing.
It's funny. I'm playing in Marlow House's Wild West stream game. I played last Friday and I'm playing this Friday, and he did the opposite. He gave you 3 shifts, but you could only put it in 1 area, so you excelled like in this one thing.
Right.
So since I made a toy maker, I put it all in intelligence.
So what's the first question for this one?
What do you like about the power shift mechanic?
Allows me to do kaiju.
Definitely. It definitely allows for that more over-the-top style gameplay, whether it be supers. I mean, they use, like Anthony said, they use supers as the example. But there's so many other genres that benefit from having that, like, super competent or powerful character. Like, there's many anime genres. There's many movie settings. Like
anime, a specific move you have if we did a boxing game, a magical item. Maybe your staff allows you to enhance fire spells and gives you power shifts just when you're using it. I give power shifts to vehicles because screw you if you get hit by a vehicle. It's endless. It's literally, is it better than humankind? Power shift.
And the one I think, I'll save that for best utilized. Dean,
what?
You want to tell what you like about it?
You just did. I mean, do I need? First of all, I love superheroes, and that was the one aspect that really really worked because, I could run any superhero game I wanted to run. I actually created the Avengers for somebody, and they came out like totally cool. It was like totally perfect because I was able to create Captain America as a speaker, but he was totally kick-ass. You would not want to get into a fight with this speaker because he's Captain America. And
flavors, baby.
It power shifts allowed it. Power shifts made it happen. And it's crazy because, like, how the book says you can put up to 3 power shifts initially in any one ability or whatever. I actually gave him like 3 power shifts in rousing speech, and he still was like one of the toughest dudes on the battlefield. It was cool as hell. So, power shifts.
Al, is a reason why you like power shifts?
I mean, I already kind of said it. I mean, it lets the characters, again, super excel at things, and it's like what Eric was saying. If they're a little bit better than most people, that's a really good way to, like, just have a power shift. Like, hey, you excel so great at this one thing, boom, one power shift, adjust that completely. And you don't have to worry about unbalancing skills or like, you know, there's so little to worry about when adding a power shift to a character sheet that it's just falls back to why I love Cypher System to begin with. It's all just so seamless.
Yeah.
So modular.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a really clean plug and play, unlike other things like Shadowrun.
So, how do you think this mechanic is best utilized?
He said it too. I mean, I think Al said it, Erik said it. You know, it's that mechanic to allow you to do those things to set the player characters apart.
Plus Ultra.
Yeah, plus Ultra. It's the way to set them apart.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
go ahead, dude.
No, I'm finished. Go ahead.
I really like the power shift and power because you could actually, you know, take any ability, whether it's from your focus or from your type, and enhance it and change it to make it something entirely different. So it allows you to genre bend with abilities that you wouldn't normally able to do in Raw without this power shift mechanic.
What's that guy who's really good with one pistol? Or the person who, like, when I'm running Warpaint, the kaiju setting, I've had people take it in their spear because they want to be that hunter that is known for using a spear only, and they just kept dumping shifts and a power for using their ability to use their spear.
One of the best
example.
One of the best examples I love too is with Anthony. You know, back to that character when we played Unmasked, he had the heater. His character was baseball based. He had a baseball bat. He could manifest these flaming baseballs that he would hit. You know,
so 80s.
You know, yeah, exactly. But he gave up. It was beautiful because he gave up an entire power shift to develop a power stunt. So one of his attacks, instead of it being amped up, what he allowed him to do was manifest a single ball, but when he hit it, it would burst into 3 balls and attack 3 targets.
Contra spread, nice choice.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
It did less damage, but
it did less damage, but
it looked cooler.
I mean, like, if you want to take an actual thing like Iron Fist, he obviously has put a ton of shifts into power for just being able to strike objects.
What is key? Yeah,
that dude just blows holes in things when he wants to do it.
Right. You know, or another character when you bring that up, you bring it up martial art characters. Shang-Chi from Master of Kung Fu literally has power shifts basically in the mystic art of Kung Fu. He actually set up a resonance frequency when the Vision tried to, dissipate on him. He set up a resonant frequency and shut him down.
Cool. But like, if we go back to Sherlock, it could be the same thing. If it was a specific power, it could be scan.
Yeah.
He literally reads a scene before anything happens.
Or you could do the exact opposite. Right, you could go into 007 and he has one shift in everything because he's pretty good at everything.
And then his gear adds extra shifts.
And that's what exactly I was about to chime in now that you mentioned that. Another cool way to utilize power shifts is adding them to gadgets. Like, let's say you're doing a spy setting. Whatever, your X-ray glasses, your your laser wristwatch, whatever have you, those all can have power shifts. To be very extra.
Batman has 4 power shifts in the utility belt.
We also had added them onto ciphers for GM Roulette and for my Supers game, whereas a power shift lets you pick one. You get 3 shifts for 10 minutes on whatever you choose. So you can add them onto ciphers as well.
My prime example of that is there's actually 2. John Wick. Nothing else has to be said. And then I think the power shifts work really well, too, for things that are not even just beyond, but like when you're lacking, but you get something that makes you good at it. That's what power shifts kind of represent. If you can't do the same computing that a computer can as math, that's a really good way to represent that if you need a quick way to do it. But the big flaw is when people are mad about light, medium, and heavy, how the damage works, give them a better weapon that has come out from some, Arc Technologies, and it does extra damage, and you throw a power shift on it, and you got what you need.
Right. Well, I mean, I think what people don't take enough time to is to absorb the idea that there are other aspects to the game that allow your character to do more damage. That light, medium, heavy is not the end.
That's the baseline.
That's just the baseline, exactly. you know, and you know, and again, it's that plug and play aspect, you know.
Agreed.
But think about it, you know, imagine taking a power shift, because they said you could take it in a specific thing. So there's an ability called combat prowess. Oh, I'll take a power shift in combat prowess. So now instead of getting +1, I got +4. You know, it's cool stuff, man.
What's the follow-up for this one? Because I do have some.
How do you think it changes gameplay? I mean, it changes gameplay in a ton of ways. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it changes it in awesome ways. But I mean,
it is that filter that takes something from black and white to color. Like, it's dramatically different. It's radio to TV. Like, it literally levels up the game to something else, and I love it because I believe it's the better version of Advantage from D&D.
It also allows you to bring out the higher tier NPCs and monsters that you always wanted to try out. I remember
hell yes,
I created a beholder for one of my games, one of my hero games, and someone in the server asked if I could share it, and it was a tier 11 creature, and the person saw it and said, "Hey, this is way overpowered." I was like, "You gotta understand, it was a supers game. It was a supers game, and not only was it not overpowered, they whooped that beholder's ass in like 3 turns."
You know
so
what?
that's
Here's
smart
the thing,
though.
too. But here's the thing too, and you know what? And I think I should run it for you guys. I have a Big Trouble in Little China.
As everyone should.
You know, because of course, it's Big Trouble in Little China. And just what you were talking about, the 3 storms are like, you know, I tiered them up, you know, wind, thunder, and lightning. So, you know, wind is like 10, thunder is 12, and lightning is 15. You know, because they're the ones to face. And you know,
you wouldn't be able to give that to characters without power shifts.
Right.
The character, you know, to show how it changes game, you wouldn't be able to add that in a regular game if characters didn't have power shifts.
But bring it down though, like
tier 6.
Like, look at everything that Sam and Dean Winchester have done. Every
definitely got
demon
power
that
shift.
they have killed is because they got an object that gave them the power shift to get it done. The Witcher, another great example of this. The Witcher would die to numerous things that he fought if he did not know the alchemical concoctions and he didn't know the different things he needed to do to fight them specifically. And you get a power shift just for that, and then it goes away.
Knowledge.
Yep,
You know,
100% knowledge. Subtle
knowledge-
ciphers,
knowledge-
subtle things that...
Do you guys have any other ways you think it changes gameplay by inserting power shifts into your game?
I mean,
If you're not using it, fucking try it.
yeah, definitely try it if you're not using it. But one aspect that could potentially be a problem or pitfall with the mechanic, it's just to lead into the next thing, is that let's say you're a new or inexperienced GM and your players have all these power shifts. Now you might be struggling to figure out what is like a good target number for them to reach. So this takes time and, you know, trial and effort or trial and error. But you know, that is could be a problem or pitfall. It's just that they don't really know what would be the appropriate challenge level for, you know, these power shifted characters.
As a designer, I can tell you that was a huge hurdle designing Warpaint. Dealing with transmongers, kaiju at a certain scale, and then having your hunters, your mecha, come in and battle them. And you want those things to be a challenge. You want them up here, and how do you bring your people up to here? And that scale gradient is gray. There's no guidelines in the book for that. That is very fucking hard.
So when like the first few times you ran it, do you think that people's power shifts actually affected the way your kaijus were effective in the story?
Yeah,
like
100%.
were they too easy, too hard?
Yeah, no. So the first time I ran it, when I had a transmonger involved, and he shifted to a class C, basically there's an alphabet grade, you know, think anime. And when they did that and they went in on them, they were not in mechs, which I was like, well, you guys aren't going to beat it. You need to be in the hounds and the mechs to do it. But when they went in, I beat the living shit out of them, because I didn't have a way for them to scale down the difficulty of what they're attacking, because they're way up here. Like they're such a higher starting task challenge than what you normally would get. So I had to have a way to peel away their abilities so you could fight them. and like system damages. So it was reverse engineering, but yeah, and it's the same problem I had doing Gods of the Fall. When you have a god of strength and a god of intelligence, but combat happens, and the intelligence guy doesn't have a way to use intelligence for attacking, they're worthless.
You think that that's actually? There's a question for all of you. So, do you think that that's another pitfall? Is that
Huge.
if you have certain characters with shifts and certain either NPCs or other player characters that don't possess shifts, you don't think they play well together?
There's a level of flex that you have to be able to do as a GM that is not taught in the book.
That's very interesting.
Well, I agree with you about it being a GM, but I think it also goes the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
You as a GM should be the one coaching your players, so they learn. And if you just drop them in and you're gonna throw, it's like the game we played when we did GM roulette. There was no way I would have dropped a dreadnought on an inexperienced player. The dreadnought that you guys fought at the end in that last battle, there's no conceivable way I would have put that thing against anybody else. But because players who are inexperienced.
But does it make a difference whether or not, because we had power shifts?
Yes.
Absolutely, because you guys, if you just had regular characters with the same abilities, first of all, you wouldn't have been able to touch the dreadnought most of the time, or you would have depleted your pools before you hitting him 2 or 3 times. You'd have depleted your pools. You wouldn't have defeated him because he had enough hit points to last you. That was a big bad. That was a big bad designed to fight basically 4, tier 1 superheroes.
But
Al, do you think that?
So what you were saying that if it unbalances things, right? Like you have this combat guy in combat, he has 5 power shifts in combat and stuff, so he's gonna blow out combat, while the intelligence heavy guy is just gonna sit there twiddling his thumbs, right? That's definitely a possibility, right? But then there's the other side of it where they're not going to be in combat all the time. So now this guy with all this combat heavy stuff is sitting in a social interaction with it's a flip side. He's now in the situation where he really can't do much and has to rely on the intelligence of the other person. So I don't think it really causes a problem. It more enhances what they shine at. Because again, in combat, the combat guy is the one who should be, beating up all the things or whatever. I mean, it's not to say that other characters shouldn't enjoy the combat as well, but the guy who spec'd in power shifts to be that combat guy is definitely going to want to shine in those moments. Whereas on the other side of the coin, with the intelligence or whatever have you, the speedy guys, they're going to want to shine in other moments. Like, the combat shouldn't really matter too much to them. They want to shine in the social aspects. They want to shine in the other aspects that their characters are spec'd for.
Let me say it this way. Because you make a valid point out. And again, I think that's where I was talking about the coaching, the education of your players. If you look at, perfect example, look at the Fantastic Four. If you take the Fantastic Four into account, Reed Richards is definitely 4 or 5 power shifts in intelligence. But he does have a power shift in combat, in some form of combat.
He has multiple power shifts in
powers.
In power. In
resilience.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. And he has power shifts, but then you turn around and you look at the Human Torch. Human Torch he's cocky, he's arrogant, but he does have...
He's the most worthless Fantastic Four member.
But he does have some power shifts in intelligence because he has strong willpower. His willpower is not, he's not Ben Grimm.
Yeah, but
you're just pointing out where the system fails, though.
But how is this pitfalls?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the pitfall is that that people, if people don't understand about making their character complete, they might. The
problem falls here. This is a system made to do numerous settings, right? The area with power shifts is 2 pages, and that's the fault. There should be a section on how to do it. Now, if you're running a game without power shifts, it is a straight fucking line. As soon as you inject power shifts, your group is like this. Literally, one is good here, one is good here, one is good here, and there's a huge hole in the center that not everyone can reach. Your fighter, your combat guy can go here, but your intelligence guy can't. And yes, he should be able to think of ways that he can help out, But unfortunately, unless you are a diehard comic fan, or you have ran other comic systems, or if you are a big-time Supernatural fan, you're not going to be able to think of that stuff. And this book doesn't teach you, and that is the fault.
You see, that was going to be my pitfall. I think power shifts, like, you know how...
I was going to do this, but it looks sexual.
Eric, you know how you said that...
So you do it anyway.
You kept a card of people's, you know, effort and edge and their point pool. That's the one thing that when I'm running a game with power shifts, I have to make sure I know where everyone's shifts are.
Well, we should have got a piece of paper with that to teach people.
Yeah, because if you don't, you could really unbalance your adventure either you know, one way or the other. And I think that could be a pitfall, especially for GMs that are not used to it. You know, like you can make a encounter way too difficult because you don't understand where the shifts are, or you can make it super cakewalk easy because you didn't realize, you know, your puzzle and somebody has 4 shifts or 3 shifts in intelligence, and there it goes out the window.
The solution is you have to design your challenges much more player and team specific than you do for a fantasy game.
Exactly.
Because in a fantasy game, it's a toolbox. They pull out tools. They hammer the nail goes in the wall. They hang the picture. When you're doing stuff with power shifts, you go, cool, the picture is the phantom zone. And everyone goes, oh, fuck. Like, you have to think outside the box. And I think really when you're designing your encounters, your GM intrusions, and teamwork styled things, you really have to take specific things and let players shine. And the goal, the ultimate goal, is in your big scenes, the spotlight hits all your players at the same time. And that's the hard thing, because you're not trained to do that within this book. That comes from experience, reading your favorite comics, watching the last 2 Marvel movies that came out, really nailing down, even if you hated them, just watch how the synergy happens in those moments. Watch your favorite Godzilla show. Watch anything where there's a team involved.
In all fairness to Monaco Games and the CSR, that's a problem with every game in balancing, you know, the perfect adventure.
We're going to get to this in the next question before I start lighting things on fire.
But you know, game balance is a problem that every system has from a GM.
It's not balance. It is literally
adventure balance.
Teaching people how to run different settings. You gave us an open setting book, multiple settings. You need to help your new peeps. Okay. Yeah, you need some floaties.
With that said, what are some of the major misconceptions of this mechanic?
Well, one of the major ones is that it's for superheroes specifically.
It does everything.
Yeah, that it can be for anything. It works in every setting, every genre. It helps shine, shine the strengths of the characters at hand, and it's not necessarily only for superheroes. It can work anywhere, basically.
We named a ton of things just in the last 2 questions.
Yeah. I know one that we didn't name that you either have to have 5 power shifts or 1 power. You could give them exactly how many power shifts, whatever the hell you do.
Right. If you want to do street level, give them 1 or 2 and tell them they can't have more than 1 in an ability.
Yeah. Right.
Or more than 2.
I know that's a misconception. Like,
but that comes back to what I just said. They don't teach you how to scale power shifts. If you want to do street level, it should be that, 3, and you can't have more than 2 in 1. And if it's going to, and we're using superheroes because of the scale that it can do. If it's going to be planetary, maybe it's 5, and you can't have more than 3 in 1. And then if it's going to be galactic, the answer is whatever. Do what you want. But they don't teach you that, and that's a stumbling block for not just GMs but players. And that is a huge fault, because the system does it well. As the 4 of us here have said, Dean, you've ran tons of superhero stuff. I know that you've ran superhero stuff. Like, it's there, but I feel like there needed to be some training wheels for it. And it falls. It's 2 pages. And then, if we get into other books that have had the chance to teach us how to do power shifts, they have fallen short. And that sucks.
You know what?
Because it works so well.
And if you really think about it, that's the thing. Monty Cook Games, Cypher System, is built to be, quote unquote, a rules light system. You know what? So what I think they did, and again, being rules light, and also
not force feeding you every aspect of the world, the genre. You know, so yeah, it falls short in not giving you enough examples. And I think you might be right, Eric. You maybe just needed one more page with, you know, a listing of scales. But on the other, but on the other side of the coin,
you see, you know, like
I fell short here.
On the other side of the,
okay, Dean. I was just gonna say that I kind of disagree. For a new player, yeah.
I will drive to Queens.
Well, that's what I was getting to, Anthony. That's what
we'll have a beer. We'll wrestle, hug it out, and have a beer.
No,
6 foot though.
For me, it is the most perfect, elegant thing that I have laid my hands on. Because I'll say it 1,000 times over. I am so tired of every time I pick up a book and they're giving me every aspect of the world. You know, the sewer system runs like this. I don't care. Give me broad strokes.
That's not true, Tolus fan.
Even Tolus, even the way I am a Tolus fan, absolutely. But Tolus is broad strokes. It gives me this massive city to do basically what I will. They give me a lot of pieces to the city, so now I understand what this district is about. And
I'm going to say what I say every time about this stuff.
I'm going to go with what Eric said, because
it's the GM side of the screen that works.
What Eric is talking about is mechanical, right?
And teaching tools.
Yeah, teaching the thought process of the mechanics. And he's 100% right. 150% right. But what my point is, I don't need that shit.
No, you don't.
Yeah, but new player or new GMs do.
No, that's why I said he's 150% right.
That's what I'm saying. For me, it's not necessary because I'll teach my players.
So, for example, we had new GM month in January.
February.
Right? February. Okay.
Yeah.
During new GM month, I wish they would have went through all of the settings that are in the core book and gave a really good explanation on how, as a GM, you could run it. So we've talked about how fantasy is hard to run for some of us in the system. There's some hiccups because we've been trained since the 80s, you know, or 70s, and on how fantasy has only been popular since the 70s and 80s. Stop it. We know it's. I played first edition. I hear you. I'm with you. I get it, but it is lacking the new way that they want us to run it. They've taught us, as we have talked about today through our 4 topics, how to run each one of the things they've introduced in the Cypher system. But what they haven't done is backed up their different settings. And I really was hoping when we got Worlds of Cypher, they were going to back that up. So here's the big question I've always had, and I've talked to some of you about this. When power shifts take you above the task 10, there needs to be a scale from 10 to 20, 10 to 15 even, on what that allows you to do. Or, if it's not a clear, concise one, to teach you how to build one for the game you're about to run. Because there's a difference between my mecha shoving over buildings and Superman pushing fucking Earth.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a way to help new GMs, or maybe not even new GM. Maybe you're a veteran, but you haven't ran superheroes. Or maybe you're a veteran and you haven't ran Supernatural. Those topics that they have put in there as settings, while they did a really cool horror mechanic, which is one of the best things they've added for a setting piece mechanic, they should be training us, especially as asset members, how to teach new GMs and players how to use it. And I believe those rules, while they are there for the GM, they are actually there to answer the players' questions, so the GM has concrete stuff to fall back on. They don't have to be elaborate. It can be simple. This table in the front of icons is less than the size of the book. And really, Gods of the Fall, Unmasked, and the Power Shift section is missing that. Does a difficulty 15 allow me to crack a mountain in half with a punch?
Well, I can honestly say that Sean K. Reynolds did a hell of a job with Stay Alive.
I have not seen that book.
You need preference. You really should, because it answers a lot of those questions. He actually needles into genres of horror and how to address each genre of horror and little mechanics to make, like, you know, there's actually a mechanic in there called the bad decision. Yep. So if you want to run a slasher film you run it with the bad decision. You run it under the pretense that people in these movies have never seen a slasher movie.
You set the scene.
I'm gonna go back to Eric's hero point because,
I just meant power shifts. I'm specifically talking about power shifts.
No. I mean, Eric's point on power shifts is 100% valid, but I can also see it from the company standpoint too. Is that they have multiple genres and a set amount of pages to do things, and the same way how
not true. You tried doing it twice. You could have put it in one of these as an explanation.
Unmasked was basically a one huge setting.
Yeah.
Right. Gods of the Fall
literally says gods.
Gods of the Fall, I can understand your point in. Right?
It didn't need to be in Cypher, though. I agree with that. It doesn't.
Yeah, and the Cypher core book is, there's so many genres in one book that, like, I can understand how something like that, though helpful, wasn't a necessity to fill. But, like what he said, an experienced GM, me and Dina whipped that up in 5 minutes. Like, what kind of game we want to run, what kind of, whether
what
we
power
level,
what power
level, and then we'll base it on that. Just like how offline, me and Eric were talking about fantasy, right? And Eric, I asked Eric a question, and he was like, "Oh, I'll just do this." He has that mindset of an experienced person, and as an experienced GM, I said, "Yo, that makes sense. I'm gonna run with it."
So I
didn't need validation from Mighty Cook Games to tell me that this was the right thing to do. As an experienced game master, just talking to another experienced game master, that was enough validation for
Which
me.
is what Cypher Unlimited is for.
Yeah.
So we didn't talk about this because we're talking about Cypher, but in the back of this book, they made it to where we are now building like communities in Discovering Destiny. And they gave us some really good sheets to do so. I wish in the back of these different setting pieces that they're giving us, and maybe they learned late. This was done afterwards. But maybe when they did that stuff, if they would have gave us some one sheets to fill out, like fill this table out for your game for what power levels are. Take the powers that you want, because they gave us that one sheet where you check off what powers are and aren't allowed, like the foci and stuff. Maybe something a level deeper for horror, maybe something a level deeper for this. I think that stuff would have been maybe all the guidelines a new GM and a player's needed. I can make that, but my point is we are supposed to teach new people, and to do so, you have to have some rules, so it's at least somewhat universal across everybody doing it.
Well,
that's it.
I'm sorry, Al. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say now it makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense, but again, back to what Anthony said, and back to I think what we're all kind of standing on, is we're experienced GMs. You know what? And being an experienced GM, and I teach a lot of people. We spend hours on Cypher Unlimited talking back and forth to people. I get private messages and everything else. You know what? So I've made it a point and a habit to kind of teach people these things. And I get what you're saying, Eric. It would be wonderful. So maybe if Monty Cook Games listens to this, takes a look at this, maybe they'll send out some errata. Maybe they'll print up,
even a post on their website.
Yeah, that too.
Because that stuff they did for the GM stuff was fucking awesome this year. And that would be in a great dive, like a one-pager. I think Charles wrote a lot of those.
Charles wrote everything.
So if like a one-pager for those teaching how to handle those things, or if there's someone who runs an amazing stream for superheroes, put that list together, make it look good. And if someone was willing to put it into the layout of Cypher, because there's something about, and this is just me as a graphic designer, if that information is put into context and into the design layout of the Cypher book, more people are going to be willing to use it at their table. If the handout looks like it belongs in that book, they're going to go, hell yeah, that's not third party, that's Cypher. I think that's what's needed to really help train new players. And also, I want people to run things other than Numenera and the other set pieces that have come out.
It definitely would be super helpful in that aspect, especially with keeping things consistent, like you said, like with that extremely variable power rating, like for just to get the example out there, a difficulty 12 might be punching a mountain in half in one game, but in another game with difficulty 12 might just be jumping over a building or something.
Yeah, it's the difference of starting with 5 power shifts versus 3.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, all you have to do, and see, I've envisioned it in my mind 3,000 times probably. Anthony, we did it when we played our, what was it, the city level superhero game you ran.
Gotham City. I ran Gotham City, the TV show.
Yeah. You know, Gotham City Knights. That was awesome. But it was scaled. You know,
and it was street level. Everyone had 3 shifts.
Right. You know,
2 in 1.
Yeah, and it was pretty cool because, you know, but like I said, I could see, you know, in a street level game, if I gave you 5 power shifts, you know, or in a level 12 feet in a city game like that, you know, street level game would be, you know what, you were able to, you know, find your intestinal fortitude and lift 1,000 pounds. You know, whereas if I'm playing a game where we got Spider-Man level characters, okay, well, you know, a level 12 shift, he's holding, you know, that's him stopping the train. You know,
what I know is that through all the competitions I've done for GMing and all of the house games I've run, all the paid gigs I've done, all the asset management stuff, consistency is key. And when the book is handed to a player and they can read it, that really helps us be consistent when it's needed. And then house rules become things that add to our setting. So I just want a little bit more to help with it because, like you, power shifts is actually my favorite thing in the book. That and horror mechanics and then flavors and then story arcs. But in order, power shifts are it. It's that thing we've all been looking for, like a universal system that can actually do it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is an awesome mechanic. I can see why we all love it so much and spoke about it at such length. But I think that's an excellent way to end our discussion on. Just point out how
We're not talking about story arcs?
Oh, I mean, that might be another video.
Because it's definitely 2 hours in right now.
Bro, what story arcs can do?
Oh man, but
they're awesome, and I love them.
First of all, that just gives us an excuse to invite Erik back on.
Yeah. So I think we had an excellent talk about our favorite mechanics, us 3, and then we'll have another video sometime in the future to talk about Erik's one of his favorite mechanics, or story arcs, because they are quite, you know, useful. They're an excellent tool for that. But it'd be another whole hour if we started talking about those things right now.
I'm going to give you one thing you can do. If you do story arcs, do not let people level or tier up other than using story arcs, and you will have a narrative game.
There we go. That's a sneak peek at his little thought process there. But you know, it's been an excellent discussion, guys. You know, thank you, Erik, so much for coming on to talk with us.
Always, dude. You guys are family.
So, Erik, you know, I know we always ask us at the end of videos, you got anything you want to talk about? Any way for people to reach you?
Yes.
All that stuff?
We'll just talk about the big thing. The big thing going on right now is Shadow of the Arena with Wizards of the Couch. I am running Shadow of the Demon Lord mixed with Spartacus Blood and Sand. It is adult content. I am warning you now. If you thought I was swearing on this show, you ain't seen shit. That show is Spartacus Blood and Sand. That premieres on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month. Next week is our episode 2. You can find episode 1 on the Wizards of the Couch Twitch stream or on their YouTube channel. It's coming out in parts. The best part of that is you are the crowd in the arena, and you get to purchase or use the free card pack when you show up to change the narrative of the game. They're challenging me as an Iron GM because they're dicks. So it's been fun, and the next scene is opening up with a dinner special. They're eating one of their gladiatorial friends.
Oh, boy.
That sounds scary and awesome at the same time.
It definitely sounds
my friend.
Definitely sounds super exciting. And again, for people who may not have seen you in our other videos, how can you be reached online?
Erik Frankhouse or Erik Frankhouse Presents anywhere, any social media. I answer to Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I do a podcast called EFP, which is going to be turning into a video series pretty soon and cut apart. I'm going to be doing a live stream on Mixer where we play Sea of Thieves in character with one of my friends who's a voice actor in LA. So just my name, brand yourself. I do too much shit to brand a company anymore.
Definitely. Go ahead, dude.
Just want to say, and you know, you've been on our show a few times. When are we coming on Erik Frankhouse Presents?
as soon as that show happens. I've been doing just the podcast. I have something I want to do with all of you, actually, but it involves me recording each one of you individually and then all of us getting together afterwards.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
Definitely want to hear more about that. It's maybe something exciting to look forward to, guys out there watching.
It is Cypher specific.
Awesome. But any last final thoughts, Anthony, Dean, before I close this out?
I'll let Dean go first so I can do my spiel.
Thank you, everybody. Check out my new product, Umber Earth, on DriveThruRPG.
Nice. Play games and find friends who haven't played during this horrible time frame and fucking teach them.
For whatever odd reason you like us and you like what we do, why don't you please try to support us? First thing you can do is like, share, subscribe any of our videos, and hit that notification bell if you can, because it'll alert you whenever us knuckleheads get on and produce a video. And if it allows us to have cool content like this and cool guests like Erik for our interviews and our editorials. If you also want to support us in another way, we actually have our own e-shop now opened up. So please go in there. We have cool t-shirts, hoodies, hats, mugs, whatever it is you like with the CU brand. If you want to rock that cool gear, you can help us that way. Or you could give us a tip on Ko-fi. For the price of a cup of coffee, I could eat for the day. Oh, really? I could eat for the day.
Especially now, ramen's cheap.
I'm just playing. Whether you want to support us or not, we love you. Either way, just watch the videos, share the videos, and we truly appreciate everything you guys do for us, and we just want to produce more content for you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much again, and just to echo Anthony's sentiments, be sure to check the description down below for the links to all that stuff we just mentioned, the coffee, the Teespring shop. We'll include links to some of Erik's stuff as well. Yeah, this has been a blast of a conversation. Cypher, we can talk hours upon hours about this stuff, but yeah.
Especially with Erik. Erik had me at 3 o'clock in the morning, we were talking about cheese.
And 3 hang-ups and a dead phone.
Just so you guys know, I have to go to work in like 4 hours or so. Yeah,
so
it'll be okay.
So I think this is a great place to end it. Thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button, and yeah, from us at the CU, we will see you later.